Welcome to my video about assembling a 6-gallon copper pot still.
Okay, as you can see, I've got the first strip and the second strip somewhat fitted together. I usually start at the middle and try to line the middle marks up, because as you go toward the edge, sometimes they don't fit up just exactly right. So what I have to do is just align the sheets so that they fit as straight as they can. And then once I get the sheets pretty much lined up, then just tape the sheets together. And what you want to make sure is tape on the lines that make the pattern, because what we're going to do after we get this piece assembled is we're going to cut around each piece. Each piece was going to be used as a template to lay on the metal so that we can cut it off. And again, like I said, if it's off by a couple, I like this section right here, if it's off by a couple of pixels or so, that's not going to make that much difference, because cutting this on the metal, we're only going to be able to cut it as close as our tool will cut anyway. So those little inconsistencies aren't going to make that much difference if you're off just a little bit. Now if you're off of 5 millimeters, 1/4 inch, something like that, then that might make a little bit of difference. But generally being off, just a small amount isn't going to make much difference at all. Okay, here you can see I'm at the end of the pattern now. I'm finishing taping up the last edges. Everything fitted quite well. Got quite a large sheet here. It's 3 foot by 4 foot. It exceeded the size of my table somewhat. But the next thing I want to do is turn this over and see if I can see the lines where the pattern come. You may not be able to see them, but I'll be able to see them fairly well, and all I want to do is just make sure I tape down all of the back edges, because when I start cutting the pattern out, I don't want really any loose edges hanging around. This gives it a little bit of reinforcement so our pattern doesn't come apart while we're cutting it. Okay, I've got all my reinforcements taped up now. So the next thing I want to do is flip this over and actually start cutting out the pieces. Now the reason why I want to cut the pieces out is so that I can tape them onto the metal and cut along the edges, because I don't want to have all this waste paper in the way so I can't see the metal. Plus it'll give me away. What we're doing is we're going to use this similar to a dressmaker's pattern. So we're just going to be using the pieces of the pattern that are inside the pieces that we intend to cut out. I believe that in this pattern you can see the frustum that makes up the line arm. I'm going to take the pair of scissors and I'm just going to manually cut this piece out of the pattern, staying as close to the edges as I can. This is actually going to be the piece that I tape onto the metal to cut around. You'll have to watch for some of the intersections because they can be a little bit tough. But as you can see, my little bit of misalignment isn't really going to make that much difference when I start cutting the pattern out, because I can make any corrections I need with the scissors. We want to be careful that we don't cut up any of the pieces of the pattern that we're going to keep, such as that round pan that I just ran into. Now cutting against these bars in the paper, sometimes I have to lift it up so that I can get the edge of the scissors underneath the edges where I didn't tape. Since this piece is loose, I'm just going to pull it up where I can get to it a little easier. So this is a very smooth curve. Once this is rolled up, this makes the 1/2 inch diameter piece of pipe that makes the end of the line arm that connects to the condenser. This around so I can see this. Now if I leave any little extra danglies hanging around, I can always go back and clean them up. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll cut a 1/2 inch or so around the pattern and then go back and cut the pattern out. I just wanted to show you one example of cutting out a piece of the pattern. So if I've left any edges, I can always go back and clean those up later. I've got this one little edge here that I didn't get real close to, but with a little bit of careful trimming I can actually go through and clean that up to where it's going to be about as close as I can get with paper pattern. And that's an example of cutting out one piece. Occasionally you'll run into a section like this. As I was cutting this out, I found that this one was disassembled across this one edge. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that every place that the paper comes together on part of the template, I want to go ahead and tape up to make sure that it's strong as I can get it. And then that will allow me to go ahead and cut it so that there's no loose edges hanging out that would come apart while I'm trying to tape it down to my template. As you can see, I'm working on the last piece here. I've just about finished all of the things. Next thing I have to do is just clean up my mess a little bit. The next thing we'll be moving on to is putting the pattern on the metal. And that completes the pattern. I'll lay this out so you can get a kind of a look at how well the pattern comes together once it's cut up. And here's an example of a round piece that was cut. So you see they actually make fairly nice patterns. The round pieces all being the same size, they're fairly easy to keep track of which goes where. I laid this sheet out. I laid it out so that it would fit a 3 foot by 4 foot sheet. So whenever I start putting these patterns on the copper, what I'll end up doing is I'll end up laying the pieces out in almost the same pattern as I have in this drawing here. The CAD program was very nice that it would allow me to define these all as individual objects. Then I could move them around, rotate them, and then just basically figure out what pattern I could most efficiently put on the sheet. Even though there seems like there's a lot of wasted copper going to be in here, it really won't be wasted in the long run. We'll figure out something else to do.